What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Khabib makes bold claim about Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier has scored several big and memorable wins since he was defeated by Khabib Nurmagomedov back in 2019. But according to the retired legend, the man who will fight Islam Makhachev at UFC 302 isn't that different from the diamond that Khabib submitted. After Poirier won the interim lightweight title by defeating Max Holloway in April 2019, he was tapped to fight Khabib for the undisputed title later that year. Nurmagomedov ended up finishing the bout with a third-round rear naked choke. Well, here in 2024, Khabib is helping his longtime friend and teammate Makhachev prepare for Poirier. While weighing in on the contest for the UFC's Countdown show, Khabib had this to say about Poirier.
I already defeated Dustin Poirier almost 5 years old. And if people gonna ask, then that time and now, did he make big change or something? No, I don't think so.
Khabib also argued that Makhachev is the more complete fighter.
Islam is better than him almost in everywhere.
Well, that comment from Khabib threw the following response from UFC featherweight Billy Quarantillo. That almost at the end is why we watch. Let's go. Other observers were quick to note that while Makhachev is a superior wrestler and grappler, that's not necessarily the case when it comes to boxing. Better grappling, yes. 100% better striker than DP? No. An Islam coach is crazy for saying Islam is a better striker than Dustin. He's not a better boxer. I mean, he's not wrong, but DP can still catch him early and make it interesting. It's going to be fascinating to see if Poirier can pull off the upset, and if he can, whether it's via his hands. Islam Makhachev disappointed with new UFC gloves. Not long ago, the UFC unveiled a new line of gloves, with the claim that the gloves were going to be a serious upgrade in what fighters have been wearing. But it looks like Islam Makhachev isn't a fan of the new gloves. In fact, the lightweight champion believes the gloves could be a problem in fights. In April, the UFC held a press conference to showcase the new gloves, and the promotion also shared out plenty of promotional materials for them. For example, in a press release that was sent out, UFC boss man Dana White was quoted saying the following: "We have been working on these gloves over the past few years with the best designers, engineers, and athletes in the world. This redesign will truly be a game changer for the entire sport of MMA. These gloves will feel lighter, fit fighters' hands better, prevent injuries, and provide maximum flexibility during fights. You'll start to see these in competition this summer." Well, ahead of Makhachev's fight with Dustin Poirier next weekend at UFC 302, the Dagestani star was asked to test out the gloves while speaking to Sport 24. Clearly, the champ has some concerns. The new gloves are very stiff. They will cause more cuts, as the previous UFC gloves were softer. These are stiffer. They don't let you fully open your hand just to make sure the fingers don't extend straight forward, but overall, they're pretty much the same. I'm gonna frame them next to the belt as the first golden gloves in the UFC. That's not exactly a glowing endorsement. It's also unfortunate that the C is peeling off the glove Makhachev's wearing in that photo. That's not a good look. But to be fair, it's early days, and it will be interesting to see what other fighters have to say about the gloves. Also, judgment should probably be held until we see how the gloves perform in actual fights. If eye pokes are reduced without having cuts increase, then that obviously would be a very good and welcome thing. Up next, Henry Cejudo versus Petr Yan next? Recently, Henry Cejudo called out Rob Font, but in an interesting turn of events, now Triple C and Petr Yan have verbally agreed to scrap. Well, via social media they have. Several days ago, Cejudo took to social media to announce he wants to fight Font next. But since Font isn't ranked in the top 5 of the bantamweight division, and because he's lost 4 of his last 5 fights, Cejudo immediately took fire for the call-out. Case in point, one man who took issue with Cejudo's challenge was fellow contender Song Yadong. Not only that, Yadong made it known that he wants to fight Triple C, and he wants to do so in China. I heard China is your lucky land, Henry Cejudo. You got your Olympic gold medal in 2008. I'm inviting you to come over this year in August. Let's put on a show for the fans. This will be a real show. Stop calling out Font. Not surprisingly, Cejudo didn't ignore Yadong's comment and challenge, as the king of cringe responded with this: "Trust me, I love going to China because over there, they refer to me as Shaq. Don't worry, your time is coming, Song. I'll make you a limp dong. But first, I want Petr Yan. I'm rushing to kick his." And it didn't take long for Yan to respond to his fellow former champ, and it sounds like the Russian fighter is down. CCP versus CCC. The triple clown returned to the land of his forgotten past achievements. Book it. So as far as the title shot mix, Cejudo versus Yan has a lot more riding on it than Cejudo versus Font. Currently, Cejudo is ranked number 5 in the UFC's bantamweight division, and Yan is ranked number 3. The one hurdle here could be in respect to the timing. Following Yan's decision win over Song in March, he reported he incurred several injuries in the fight, including a torn ACL. So one would think he won't be returning to the octagon anytime soon. Up next, Ronda Rousey reveals the truth on UFC events. Ronda Rousey became one of the biggest names in all of sports, not just MMA, during her reign as the UFC Bantamweight champion. But recently, the star provided another history lesson on how the UFC was not interested in women's MMA until Strikeforce showed it had massive potential. Yes, if you're new to MMA, you may not even know that before Rousey joined the UFC, she was one of Strikeforce's top commodities. Strikeforce's decision to promote women's fights came after the buzz Gina Carano generated competing for Elite XC before joining the Scott Coker-led company. Well, Rousey has been doing media following the release of her autobiography. The retired fighter reflected on Carano's success and how that opened MMA for her.
The spot below the glass ceiling was the Strikeforce championship, which was basically only there because Gina Carano, her dad was connected with the Las Vegas Athletic Commission and started sanctioning women's MMA fights just for her. And she ended up getting, so much support and everything with her matches that they basically created the Strikeforce 145 division championship for her to fight for. And, one division. They ended up adding a 135-pound division later as well.
Later in the interview, Rousey acknowledged that after seeing future rival Miesha Tate compete, she started to realize how big women's MMA could be. Yep, the world definitely did end up going nuts, and while there's no draw like Rousey today in women's MMA, it's become a staple of the sport. Dillon Danis calls out Nick Diaz for UFC 303. It's been less than 7 months since Dillon Danis announced he was retiring from fighting, but the outspoken fighter and social media trolls called on the UFC to book him for a battle with the legendary Nick Diaz. After Danis was released from his Bellator deal last fall, the noted grappler ultimately announced he was retiring in November. But given his track record of making repeated statements not rooted in reality, not everyone believed Danis was serious. Well, fast forward to May 2024, and Danis recently called for a fight with Diaz at UFC 303. Add me versus Nick Diaz on UFC 303. Let's go. Now, there's a bit of a backstory here. In other words, Danis didn't pick Diaz's name out of a hat. Earlier this year, when Diaz was asked via social media if he's ducking Danis, the Stockton Star posted, "Don't be scared, homie." So, could this fight actually happen? While there's no doubt a lot of fans would likely love to see it, don't hold your breath. First off, Danis isn't currently signed by the UFC. And when Dana White's been asked about the controversial fighter, he hasn't sounded too interested in changing that. Further, Diaz has competed since his disappointing Octagon return in 2021, when he lost to Robbie Lawler. So given that UFC 303 is approximately 1 month away, it would be pretty shocking if Diaz was added to the card, period. Much less for a fight with Danis. But you never know, right? If Nick pushes for the fight, maybe the UFC will make it happen? Now, let's take a look at Robert Whittaker receives warning for Khamzat Chimaev fight. Khamzat Chimaev is set to face a considerable challenge next month, namely former longtime middleweight champion Robert Whittaker. Recently, Chimaev's buddy and training partner, Darren Till, was asked to weigh in on the fight. While the Liverpool fighter praised Whittaker for his abilities, Till doesn't see the former champion lasting long against the undefeated star. Chimaev is set to battle Whittaker on June 22nd in a card that will be hosted in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. The bout will be Chimaev's first since he worked his way to a tightly contested decision victory over former welterweight champion Kamaru Usman. Well, Till recently sat down with the Mac Life ahead of his boxing match with Julio Chavez Jr. Not surprisingly, the charismatic fighter was asked to comment on Chimaev-Whittaker matchup, and Till offered his take.
I think Khamzat does beat him. He's just got to be very careful. Whittaker's such a crafty opponent. Like, the way he mixes his strikes up with his takedowns is I don't think he's going to start shooting for takedowns on Khamzat, but I think Khamzat shooting on Whittaker, you've seen when Whittaker fought Yol, he's got great defense. But I think if Khamzat's going to beat him, which I do, I think he's going to beat him in the second round. I think he can stop him. And Khamzat, he's got power, man, on the feet. Like, he can really punch and kick. So it'll be a good fight.
It certainly has all the makings of a very good fight. After all, Chimaev has one of the most terrifying top games in all of MMA, and as Till noted, he can crack. Whittaker is widely regarded as one of the best middleweights of this generation, thanks to stellar wrestling defense and top-notch striking. So can Chimaev get Whittaker out of there in the second round? And if he can't, will he be able to hang with Whittaker in the later rounds? The MMA community reacts to Khamzat Chimaev's insane body transformation before his next fight at UFC Saudi Arabia against Robert Whittaker. Here's what the community had to say. Based on his body weight, he can actually play in 3 divisions: welterweight, middleweight, and light heavyweight. If this dude starts missing weight at middleweight, I'm pissed. I guess all the neckbeards are excluded from testing? Khabib camp, this seems to be a trend. Bro don't have a cardio, and now he's putting some muscle. This is enough for me. Robert Whittaker by 4th round TKO. Photoshop, it's so obvious. These guys just can't stop weight bullying. Shaking my head, we need to kick them out the sport. More muscle means stamina gets worse. Bro is finished. I'm even more confident in Rob. Khamzat's gonna gas bad. Charles Oliveira disrespects Arman Tsarukyan. In a recent interview, Charles Oliveira said that Arman Tsarukyan just takes his opponents down and holds them, and won't be able to beat Islam Makhachev with that strategy. Here's what Charles had to say. Arman is a guy that takes you down and holds you there the entire time. No way he beats Islam. It's not a fight he can win. Of course, I've just said this and I can't backtrack. MMA is unpredictable, but I think Islam is way more experienced, has more focus, more hunger, and is much stronger than Arman. Top comments. Shab was a heavyweight. Rogan is like 5'5". Love Joe, but Brendan would have effed him up. Shab would have knocked Rogan's head off. That's one thing that big goof had, is power for real. Shab was no joke in the cage. He's beat Mitrione, Krokop, Gonzaga, got a lot of finishes with his hands though. Rogan has absolutely no ability with his hands. Seen him punching that heavy bag recently. Shab would keep it on the feet and KO him within seconds easily. If you disagree, you're confused. Seems like mid or late 30s is the cutoff period for athletes to say, I can't do this anymore. Meanwhile, Yoel Romero is still competing in combat sports at 47, and Mike Tyson is coming back to box. It really depends on your body and drive for competition, so a mix of both for some people.